So here we are with what was supposed to be a one-part video showing my latest build. Unfortunately, it didn't quite work out that way, but more on that a bit later in the video. The idea was to use some of the components I already had from my previous build, but revisit the FormD case with some new additions like the 4090 Founders Edition and the Ryzen 5800X3D CPU. The 4090 was to be kept air-cooled because this time around I'm very pleased with the cooling performance, while on the CPU side I'd do a hardline custom loop because of space constraints. It's a lot to cram into the FormD case, but I took it as a challenge. I did tons of research and planning, and I had a secret weapon in my bag to make this build come together. I even designed a 3D printed support bracket for the 4090, which screws into the FormD front panel, and on the 4090 side it uses existing holes under a magnetic cover. These holes are actually intended for this exact purpose, although I haven't really seen any case that makes use of these, so this actually could be a world first. The secret weapon of the build was to be the Modultra LOBO, which stands for Lowboy. This is a water block and DDC pump housing, similar to the Barrow pump block combo or the Aquanaut. What sets this apart is the absolutely insane build quality and the outstanding design work that was put into it. I received this one from Modultra for this project specifically, and I was really excited to put it to the test. The CPU water block part of the Lobo is super slim, and I especially like the machining around the pump volute chamber. There's even a cold plate flatness adjustment if you want to account for the concavity of certain CPU integrated heat spreaders. The top part of the Lobo houses the DDC pump itself and also functions as a heatsink, not only passively cooling the pump, but also conducting the generated heat into the loop. One thing to note here is that because of the super low profile of the Lobo and the fact that I'm using the T1 in 3-slot mode to accommodate for the 4090, RAM clearance plays a big role. If your RAM sits too high, there will be no way to make your tube runs. So here I'm using my oldest kit, the Crucial Ballistics Sport LT, as luckily it's one of the lowest profile RAM modules available on the DDR4 platform. Of course, in my case, such a solution is overkill, as my loop will only include the CPU and the TX240 Radiator from XSPC. But the tight space inside the T1 is a perfect match to test out the small footprint of the Modultra LOBO. The top part of the case, or bottom as it's seen here, houses the TX240 Radiator paired with the Noctua Slim fans, but this time I used a 3D printed spacer bracket that puts the fans right up against the top grille, which gives us a bit more room inside the case and should also help with cooling by eliminating the small gap between the fans and the top grille, which I've long suspected to be the cause of poor cooling performance with this particular setup. Next, I'm using a link-up Gen 4 riser instead of the stock riser. And this is where our problems begin. You see, the Modultra LOBO comes with very long mounting screws, and when properly mounted, these actually protrude quite a bit on the backside of the motherboard, ever so slightly past the edges of the AM4 backplate. These screws have quite sharp edges as well, and I discovered that they actually collide with the riser. Now, normally this would probably not be an issue, but here things are very tight, and there's basically no breathing room for the riser, as it is sandwiched between the motherboard and the GPU. I didn't want to risk damaging the shielding of the riser, or even worse, risking a short. You can actually see how the screw left a deep circular mark on the riser here. So I tried filing down the screws, but in the process I somehow damaged the threading on one of them, and when I tried screwing it into the AM4 backplate it got stuck and ended up damaging the threads on the backplate as well. I decided not to risk it further, so I ordered a replacement AM4 backplate and also some new bolts, both in the original length and slightly shorter ones for good measure. The original bolts are 1 1/4 inches, while the shorter ones I ordered are 1 1/8 inches, which by my guesstimates should be perfect with no need for filing. This goes to show that even if you do your homework perfectly, when it comes to builds like these, it doesn't always go as planned, and even the smallest of details can make the difference between success and failure. I think a lot of times it's hard to appreciate just how difficult a build like this is, and I wanted to make this video anyway, instead of waiting until I received the new bolts. And it's not even close to being finished. I still need to test the acrylic tube runs, of which I suspect one will need a redo, figure out the cable management, and also figure out the order in which everything will go into the case, especially the GPU, which is very difficult to install without removing the spine of the case. That's all for now. Hopefully I will have something finished and working to show you guys in part 2 of this project. As always, thanks a lot for watching and see you in the next one.